slogans in your book. You know, first set your house in order, then. But I have an extremely common sense, naive question here. But what if in trying to set your house in order, you discover that your house is in disorder precisely because the way the society is messed up?
So I think that the good that people are capable of is actually, it's a higher good than the evil that people are capable of. And believe me, I do not say that lightly, given what I know about the evil that people are capable of. And I think that, I believe that the central psychological message of the biblical corpus, fundamentally, is that. That's why it culminates in some sense with the idea that it's necessary to adopt, it's necessary to confront the devil and to accept your, what would you say, the unjustness of your tortured mortality. If you can do that, and it's a challenge, as you just pointed out, that's sufficient to challenge even God himself, that you have the best chance of transcending it and living the kind of life that will set your house in order and everyone's house in order at the same time. And so I think that's even true in states like North Korea.
That point where Peterson said, get your house in order, is before trying to influence the world, is where Žižek came back with the criticism that, like, you obviously wouldn't say that to someone in North Korea.
Why wouldn't you say that to someone in North Korea? Like, what else are you going to say to them?
Because you don't, if somebody's clearly being, their life is being ruined by an extremely oppressive system, you don't tell them, fix your life before you try to criticize the system. Because sometimes the reason why your life is messed up is because of these outside influences.
Yeah. Well, sorry, are you saying something, Chris? You're on mute.
Why don't you just go ahead, Kurt?
Okay. So this is a form of argument that I've heard many times. Like, I remember I mentioned to a friend of mine, I'm reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and, it's about taking responsibility for your own financial position and this sort of thing. And people will come back with these ideas like, well, what about a child in Africa? They can't improve their financial position. Or what about, the poor child in Chiapas, the native child who can't read and doesn't have any opportunities? But that's it's just creating this impossible position, creating this idea of somebody who can't improve their position at all, even though you don't know. Like, I don't know what life is like for somebody in North Korea. I do know that generally people should take responsibility for, generally it will be beneficial in the long term for people to take responsibility for their own situations. But it's not really possible for me to say how much that would help somebody in North Korea, but it probably would, at least a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the idea...
I don't think he was saying that somebody in North Korea can't improve their lives by taking responsibility. I think he was saying that you shouldn't tell somebody who's being oppressed that they need to fix their life and have a good life before they can speak out against their oppressor.
Yeah, he's not saying that you have to fix your life before you can speak out against the system. He's saying you have to fix your life before you can fix the system, right? You can still speak out against the system and you can still call it oppressive or whatever. But I think Jordan Peterson's main point, in this main point here, is that maybe you are oppressed. Maybe there's a whole, maybe you're at a huge disadvantage and there's all these evil people who are exploiting you, but there's a little tiny thing that you can affect. Okay. And if you take responsibility for that one little thing that you can affect, then you'll get better at affecting that thing and you'll get better at taking responsibility for more stuff, and you'll be able to, and you'll grow your power that way, and it'll kind of spiral upwards until eventually, you do end up breaking out of the system. And I think it's also important to point out that just yelling about your grievances rarely actually improves the system. What actually improves the system is people taking responsibility and building a new system.
Well, I'd say also I would add that a big part of Peterson's response to that question was it was interesting because he basically was saying that you address the things that intervene in your own life. So if you are someone who like lives in North Korea, for example, like it's unlikely that you'll be able to like govern your life well in any way because the government is so deeply oppressive. And so if you even try to take basic steps of improving your life, you will run into the government very quickly. And at that point, you will have a responsibility to confront the government. And I think part of what Jordan Peterson would say is that if you know, for those of us who are lucky enough to be living in a wealthy Western country, there's a large extent to which we can fix our own lives before we run into government tyranny. But if you're someone living in an oppressive state, part of putting your life in order will be to like get involved in politics in some way or to confront tyranny very soon. And I think that's why Peterson said so quickly, like, I'm not asking people to martyr themselves. He was qualifying himself in that way. And I think he didn't totally make the leap of logic clear, but that's how it came off to me.
There's another couple of examples that I think of, which are they're a bit funny, but let's see how this sounds. So there was the dictator, I guess, of Taiwan after they set up their own thing from China, right? And he started researching things. He was son of the previous dictator, and he started researching different systems of government. And he said, hang on, if I want my country to be prosperous and people to be fulfilled, we need to move away from this system of dictatorship. So this is him cleaning his room. He said, let's set up a liberal democracy in Taiwan. And that's exactly what he did. Similarly, in Thailand, King Rama IX traveled the world and saw how things were in Britain and other countries. And he said, hang on, we've got this oppressive caste system in Thailand and it's really holding people back. So let's get rid of it. So he basically, like in a manner of speaking, he emancipated people because they weren't quite slaves, but the caste system was pretty strict. So by him setting his house in order, he change things for others. Now, not everybody has that kind of power, but I do think if individuals set a good example, that might eventually be reflected in political leaders as well.
Yeah, agreed.
That's an interesting point. I mean, there have been a couple other examples. I think it was is it Liechtenstein, another country where you have monarchs giving up a significant portion of power to their states.
So I just want to offer a different way of viewing that, because when you're talking about leaders engaging in systems thinking and making decisions that are affecting other people, it's probably not the case that these dictators or monarchs engaged in, like a whole lot of stoic meditative work or engaged in a whole bunch of discipline practices. I mean, what you were describing, Kurt, sounded more to me like somebody looking at a collective system and then making decisions based on how it would affect other people, which seems like pretty much the opposite direction of the initial approach that Peterson is recommending. So I can understand how Peterson gets from individual self-discipline increases capacity for you to positively affect other people as you take on more responsibility. But I mean, based on, I can't think of too many social changes or political movements that affected either positive or negative outcomes where the start was those political leaders just did a whole bunch of self-discipline work before they started engaging in activism. And, maybe Peterson has predictions that people who do that kind of thing will be more effective, but I still don't understand why, that top down why he just spends so much time on the individual level, other than that's, part of his setup, right? The more people that subscribe to it, the better off he is, just sort of financially in terms of social capital. But that doesn't really seem to be how cooperative movements or big social changes or even top-down power abdications actually work. So I was wondering if you guys had any thoughts about that.
God, Dan, you are so cynical about Jordan Peterson. Okay, Katie.
I was going to say, I would disagree with that. I mean, well, we really don't know. For one, like, how do we know what kinds of personal development or what kinds of self-work that activists or famous figures in political or historical movements did before they got famous or during? And I think a lot of the process of, like, in order to become a well-known activist, or if you want to produce consistent work and develop a good reputation, the advice that he's giving is things that you would kind of naturally do along the way in order to get to a successful and influential point. Maybe it's not necessarily conscious in every case, but I think that, like, generally speaking, people who make really large impacts on the world have done a lot of, I don't know, they've probably done a lot of work, or certainly I don't think it would hurt. Like, you, at the very least, you need to have a lot of self-assuredness and self-confidence in order to be putting yourself out there and speaking up and working hard consistently, even in the face of significant challenges.
Yeah, and I would say again, like, Peterson's not advocating that you go into, like, your, crystal forest of solitude and do all kinds of self-work and turn yourself into, like, a perfect person and then you come out and do activism. Like, he says in his response to that question, like, he basically just suggests that people deal with the problems that present them, that the world presents to them. So if you're, like, he would probably say, like, if you were, like, a Black person living under Jim Crow, then Jim Crow is something that, like, affects your life. It's a problem that is, like, affecting you. And so you approach it in an honest and forthright way and following, like, all these, like, basically rules of, like, virtue and integrity. Whereas, like, he would probably say in that case, like, I guess if you're a white person too, it would also affect your life. He would say in that case, like, you deal with the problem that's in your life and in your community, even if whether it's a political problem or not. Versus, like, he would probably have more of a problem with someone like, I don't know, if I say, like, I want to be a revolutionary, I'm going to go to Rojava and join the revolution there, even though, it has nothing, it doesn't have, it maybe indirectly has to do with me. I guess everything is indirectly connected, but it's not so much, I'm more intervening on that situation. It's not intervening on me.
Yeah, and Peterson made a great point about this exact thing. The more local the problem that you, like, the first problem, like, the more local you can go, the better, because you'll actually directly experience the negative consequences when you make mistakes, and then you'll learn from your mistakes. And he specifically said, if you're solving other people's problems, then you actually might never experience any personally negative consequences. And so you might think that you're actually solving other people's problems when really you're just causing a lot of pain, but you don't even know, because it's not, it's not directly affecting you.
That's a great point. I guess Žižek's response would be, like, the internationalism thing, that there's certain problems on a certain scale that we're going to have to deal with before they personally affect us. Like, you could say, like, maybe climate change, if we're accepting that climate change is catastrophic, that it's coming, and that by the time it starts affecting us, it's going to be too late to do anything about it, then that would be, I guess, a counter argument.
I think another counter argument could be that sometimes you have problems where, like, for example, if you're talking about a problem that affects specifically children, or a problem that affects specifically animals, or a problem that affects specifically people who come from a really impoverished area where they don't have internet connectivity or something like that, you might need outside advocates, because otherwise situations where the ones affected don't have a voice would never be addressed. But I mean, in general, I agree that, like, making sure that your own life is in order is a good thing in life, or in activism, and that you're going to be more effective, the more effective you are as a person in general.